Welcome to From Seed to Harvest, Optimizing Your Seed Investment with Paul Feenan at NOFA New Hampshire's 20th Annual Winter Conference. I'm Laura Andrews, NOFA New Hampshire's Program Coordinator, and I'll be hosting the session today with Nikki Kolb, NOFA New Hampshire's Operations Manager. First, please note that we are recording this session and all sessions throughout the conference, and we will share the recordings with you at the end of the week. Please keep yourselves muted during the workshop and type any questions into the chat box along the way. NOFA New Hampshire aims to foster an inclusive, safe, open, and welcoming environment for all, and we encourage participants to keep questions and comments constructive. For technical issues, please feel free to communicate publicly through the chat or message me privately. You can message me here or through NOFA-NH, that will also go to me. And if you'd like to access closed captioning, click on the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, click the arrow on the CC icon, and then click Show Subtitle. And if you're watching in a smaller screen, click the three dots at the bottom of your Zoom screen that read More, and then click the Show Subtitle option. Now, before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that this conference is taking place on the land of the Pennacook tribe, or Indakina, the Abenaki word for the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the Alnobak, or people who have stewarded this land through the generations. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Feenan of High Mowing Organic Seeds.
Thank you. And I will share. Oh, you need to stop. Okay, you should see my screen. Well, thanks for having me, everybody, and I appreciate being here. And before I get started, and thanks for the acknowledgement, the land acknowledgement, I want to take a second and acknowledge some folks that I think we've all relied on over these last couple of years, and that's, I've been working from home since the pandemic started, and feel pretty privileged to be able to do that. It hasn't been without its challenges, raising a couple of kids through the pandemic, and it has been really both challenging but also nice to be home when they got home from school, or if they had to stay home from school during that longer period, or anytime they've been close contacts and had to stay home from school. It's been nice to have somebody here. And there have been, we've all kind of relied on, essential workers in our lives. And that doesn't obviously stop at High Mowing. We've had, such an awesome group of people that have showed up at the warehouse, every day and physically, done all the work that needed to be done, receiving and moving seeds through the system and putting them in packs and getting them out the door. And we're really proud of what we've been able to do there, as far as getting seeds out the door without many pauses at all, if any, really. And so those people really deserve a shout out and gratitude. So thanks to those folks. My name is Paul Feenan, and I am the New England commercial grower sales rep. I also take care of customers and accounts in Michigan and Wisconsin. And so I just actually came over from the Organic Vegetable Producer Conference, which happens in Wisconsin every year, virtually now, but literally was watching a spinach presentation in that conference before I virtually puddle jumped back to New Hampshire. So it's great to work with both groups of customers. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our goals and our structure for this talk. So the number one goal is for growers to have reliable and successful seed propagation with the products that you get from Johnny's and other seed, or from High Mowing and Johnny's and Osborne and other seed companies. So High Mowing is a 100% certified organic seed company. And so that might inform, if you didn't know that, that might inform, as you look through the catalog, why we have certain varieties and why we don't. And if there's any questions you ever have about that, I'd be glad to answer those for you. And my contact information will be at the end of the presentation here. The second goal is really to strengthen relationships and communication between seed companies and growers in order to work on this common objective. And so it's a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm glad to help with propagation techniques and equipment, but this talk isn't really so much about the how-tos of propagation, though it's pretty easy to for the conversation to shift in that direction. But this is a conversation that we started a little bit last year with conferences where we wanted to do our best to kind of lift the veil on seed production and distribution, and especially in my case, in certified organic seed production and distribution. And so last year we did sort of a lifting of the veil of that first part. And this year we wanted to talk about like that interface between all that work that kind of leads up to, seeds, leaving the house here in Vermont and getting to the grower and hitting the growing medium. And so we'll kind of focus a little bit about, and almost like a rehash of some of the stuff I talked about in some conferences last year. You might have seen them. I don't think I did NOFA New Hampshire, but I did do some other New England conferences. So, and that's just to talk about what we do, to get seeds to ensure that that goal number one is met, reliable and successful propagation of seeds. And then also focus a little bit on what growers do or can do to, ensure there, and then what we can do together when we need to communicate and how we can communicate best. And then from there, we can decide whether we want to go to, this one fork, which is I have sort of prepared, is to talk about 3 crops that we garnered were most difficult for growers, or not most difficult, but that through a survey, growers communicated to us that they had some challenges with, and that's lettuce, but and in particular pelleted lettuce, carrots in the field, of course, and then beets. And it was really in that order was the way the survey came back. Or we can just sort of, kind of keep the conversation more general about seeds and seed distribution and kind of delve into some propagation, conversation as well. So we'll start with what seed companies do to facilitate success. And I'm not going to go through these, 100% individualized, but there's a few things here that are worth it, worth kind of highlighting. And then we can, if you see one in this list that you want to talk about a little bit more, there'll definitely be some time. But I'm try to keep from just reading off my slides there. But I did highlight in the first bullet there the word trusted, and we trust all the people that we work with to produce seed, and that changes from year to year quite a bit. And High Mowing is in a place of evolution, and I would say growth and expansion when it comes to the number of people we work with to produce seeds for us. And that has to do with this concept of contract growing, and the idea of us getting a hold of seeds and working through any intellectual property issues that might be associated with those seeds, and and the breeders of those seeds. And when we can, you know, get a hold of stock seed to produce more seed and get it out in the hands of growers throughout the country, and to really expand that model. You know, I think High Mowing, you know, really began that work with our own farm in Vermont, where we produced and bred a lot of our own material, and you'll see that in the catalog. We've benefited from some of the some similar work, you know, with Johnny's, and we've partnered with them with some of their breeding work. Carmen Pepper's an example of that. And then, of course, we've had this, you know, sort of pretty, I'd say, vast network of collaborators in the university research world, and then some of the seed coalition work that's out there, where new varieties have been developed, or highlighted, or maybe even curated in such a way that it's maybe an old open pollinated line, but we've helped or been part of or assisted this concept of kind of curating those selections and breedings of those open pollinated lines, so that even though it's a open pollinated plant, it's pretty true to type, and may even really, you know, highlight the characteristic that we're really after. Scarlet Nance carrot is an example of that, where we've worked really hard to really curate that line. And bush delicata is another one we can talk about a little bit later. But the word trusted is also has a little bit of special meaning for us that's worth noting, in that we do work with some, you know, breeder vendors that are worldwide, and some of them we've been working with for so long that we refer to them as trusted vendors. And the difference between we trust them and they're a trusted vendor is that, you know, those vendors, quality control methods, testing methods, and screening methods, we accept as our own. So so that if a particular vendor is a trusted vendor and they have a germination percentage that's within our you know, protocols as far as timeline goes, we'll accept that. And the reason that that's worth even noting in a talk like this is because it can often really impact how quickly we can turn that seed around. If it's not a trusted vendor, even though they may have germinate, you know, tested the seed for germination, or screened it for a particular pathogen or pest, we don't necessarily, we trust them, but we verify it. And so we run that seed through our QC system and our screening process. Let's see what else is on this list here. I just wanted to say that if you do run into problem with a seed, it's always really helpful, and it's never weird or contentious for you to report that to me. It might not always be the seed, or it might not have been the seed that we sold you, but that's not the point. The point is, you know, knowing that you're having an issue with the seed is a really, first of all, from a grower rep standpoint, from a sales rep standpoint, it's really important for me to know. But it's also quite important for us in that we kind of keep really close track of those issues in some QC logs and daily meetings, and we can often really quickly find a problem through these reports from you all. So don't ever hesitate to give a call. Don't think it's going to be weird. You know, it's going to be a good, candid conversation. So let's see. So yeah, just I'll leave that up for just another second while you note anything in there that you might want to have a question about. And if there is, we could probably take those now. Maybe if there's just one or two, Laura. If not, that's okay. We can keep moving.
There are none in the chat right now.
Okay, great. So one of the topics that was in there, things that we could do is obviously, you know, keep good records. That's one of them, but also to have overlapping multiple and or overlapping lots of seed. And so a lot, when I use the word lot, I'm referring to a production of seed. And so the same vendor might either grow themselves, or they might contract with their own growers, and they might have multiple productions of seed that are available to us. And so we have a whole process unto ourselves where we're sort of determining whether we want to bring in a particular lot. And I'll back up a second and I'll highlight this sample lots and dirty germ piece. And so we might bring in a lot, just a pound or so, and sort of run it through our QC test. We might even grow it out if it's a microgreen, or if it's a pea, we'll grow it out under lights and make sure it's true to type. And we'll run what's called a dirty germ on it, which is basically just a germ before the seed has been cleaned. And it might have some broken seed in it, and it might have some other maladies. It might even have some chaff or junk in it, and we'll still run a germ test on it. And then we'll have a dirty germ standard that might not be as high as our cleaned seed standard, but we'll run that. And then if we do bring in, lots of seed, they hit our lot browser. And this is what I'm often looking at as I'm sort of trying to solve problems or trying to find someone the right seed. And so here's a couple examples, these next two slides. Sunflower shoots are a microgreen, and they can be a little persnickety for different growers. And they can be, one grower might have a lot of luck with a particular lot of sunflowers, and one might not. One might like bigger seed than smaller seed, and some of the lots have more seeds per pound than the others. And so they have different size seeding rates or seeds, which may impact seeding rates in the microgreen trays. And so there's all sorts of reasons to have multiple lots for us in play. And so here's just an example of our current situation with sunflower seeds. And you can see we've got 4 lots in play: in 2601, 2602, 2703, and 2713. And right now I've got 2601 highlighted, and you can see what I'm seeing when I'm looking at germination percentages and tests. And it looks like this seed has been tested 4 times in its lifetime here at High Mowing, and so I can kind of keep a good eye on that, and I know where it came from and all those types of things. And the other thing that's worth mentioning here is that of the 4 lots that are in play, you'll notice that in the third column on the sheet, it says it's a size, and bulk is our deep storage, and it's our best storage, and it's the most climate control environment we have. We have a brand new bulk cooler as of last year, which is really fantastically controlled. And so that seed that's in bulk is kind of the deep well that I'm looking at when, and then everything else that's either a pound or 5 pounds or a quarter pound, that's on the shelf and available to sell to someone. So that's just a little example of what I'm looking at. Oh, yeah, that's okay. I'd like to move on to the next one. So here's Mizuna, which is another, this is not necessarily a microgreen, but it is in some of our microgreen mixes. And it's not only a green unto itself, but it ends up going in a lot of our mixes as well. And so here's another one where we have, a fair amount of stock, and we have 3 lots in play. And this screen, I just grabbed, the lots and then the corresponding germination percentage of each of the lots. And I'll give you a little inside intel here. The first number in the lot number, the letters are the vendor, and the first 2 numbers, 27 in this case, 25, 26, 27 in this case, is the year in which we brought the lot in. So you can see that the ASQ 2501 is, kind of seed that's been around a while. And that's okay. A lot of people have the misconception that the seed that you're that you're seeding is, this year's seed or last year's seed. And I had that common misconception too. And when you really think about it, if you just sort of take a second and you're like, become like aware with the world, you can imagine that that's just not possible, right? Like the seed has got to be grown, and it's got to be grown in enough inventory to serve a lot of people. And then it's got to get cleaned, and it's got to run through a QC process, and then it's got to get packed up. And if something goes wrong with it, we have to have another production altogether somewhere else that we can call upon in order to fulfill orders or, make people happy. And so, of course, we're going to want to have, multiple years worth of seed in the production. And then that gets into a whole nother series of, insurances that we work into, which are, cycle germination tests and also just science, knowing how long these seeds are viable. And the other thing I want to point out in this slide before I take a breath here and see if there's any more questions is that new seed isn't always a new lot isn't always best. So in this case, you'll see that the ASQ 2501 has fluctuated in its germination percentage. And you can imagine that too, if you kind of, take a second and think about it, that, as seeds come off their mother plant, there's a period of sort of pause before those seeds are viable in nature. And also just seeds go through a period of, common, viability and respiration. And so their percentages go up. And some of that can have to do with the sampling method, and the randomization of sampling this seed. But also different lots just have different, viability and different performance measures because of the year that they were grown and the environmental characteristics of that particular year, how it was handled afterward, how it was dried down, all of these different factors. And so you can see that, in this slide. Any questions about what seed companies can do so far?
None in the chat.
Great. Well, if you have a question, there'll be a chance to unmute yourself later, and we can kind of see each other's faces and chat. So what can growers do to ensure success when it comes to the seed receiving storage process and then beyond? So first thing you can do is proactively check in with someone like me about specific crops that you're having trouble with. If you're just having a problem germinating pea seed, I had a problem with that when I was farming full time, and I just couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. It ended up being like a seeder issue that I had for a couple of years, but check in with your seed company about that, and just be candid about what the problem is you're having and check in about it. And that can go a long way to helping us make a recommendation. So talking about your trouble spots, talking shop about that. What are your seed receiving procedures? How do you deal with seeds when you first get them? I recommend that you not let them sit around very often in that box, that you check them over. You compare it with the packing slip. Obviously, there's some office work here, some administrative work that you'd want to do with your seeds, and check the quality of the seed packets. You can't really do too much to check the seeds themselves, but you can certainly see what the lot is. There's a batch number that a lot of people get caught up in. There's not much that we do together, you and I, when it comes to the batch number. That has to do with which run of packing that seed came with. It's very rare that the batch number becomes something that you and I have to deal with. But the germination sticker on there is pretty important, and there's been a lot of talk about that the last couple of years about the germination percentage testing stickers, and that they're not getting updated as much. And that's a little true. And it has to do with seed companies, packing to projections during high demand times, and we're packing out a lot. And then if there's ebb and flow on that demand, if sales check up, then we've got seeds that are packed with a germination sticker on them that can be older than the germination test that's been last done on those seeds. And it's worth mentioning that when we do cycle germination testing, we are in fact taking from shelf sizes in addition to bulk, because we want to make sure that the ones that are packed out in packets that customers are going to get also get tested on the shelf. But going through and breaking all those boxes down that have seeds in them, seed packets rubber banded up, and re-stickering all those seed packets is a little prohibitive. And so there are some times when your seed packet might not have the most up-to-date information. So it's perfectly appropriate to say, matter of fact, I had an email today about some microgreens that a customer got in January, early January, and the germination sticker was from 12/20. And those seeds have been tested as recently as 8/21, but she just happened to get a pack that was on the shelf from that earlier batch run of seeds. So think about your seed receiving procedures. Get those seeds put into storage, and we can talk about storage because storage is pretty important. I'm going to skip ahead to a slide. I might back up again. So I'm going on a limb here, just showing you my seed storage. It's not really all that high end, but I do have a lot of seeds. And so my long-term seed storage is a closet in the northwest corner of my house. And it's like right there, right behind me. And it's closed all the time. And I am like I'm just a bear about it being closed all the time. And I let my kids put their coats in it, but I don't let them put their coats in it if their coats have snow on it, snow on them, things like that, right? So they know I like to have it closed and it, because it stays really cool in there. It stays really dry in there. And it also stays really cool in there comparatively to the summer. Not quite as cool as my basement, but much drier than my basement. So I'm really looking for that coolest, darkest, driest place. And I'm always thinking about summertime, because the summertime is when you actually lose a lot of viability in your seed storage. My hunch is that more seed is negatively impacted by short-term storage strategies during periods of seeding, during the seeding season, than as a result of poor long-term storage. So on the right is my I'm gonna seed you box, along with my notebook there. And my I'm gonna seed you box is plastic, and I can see inside it, but it's pretty good plastic, and it's pretty well sealed. There's even like a little kind of rubber gasket there on the top or somewhere. And so when those handles are kind of clipped, those seeds are pretty good. In the summertime, I'll even put packages of desiccant in there that I poach from other places, and sometimes I even order them on Amazon, but most of the time I just poach them. I find them somewhere, I procure them. And I'll put those in there during summertime when the humidity, generally speaking, is just much higher. And I'm really careful about if I say I'm gonna seed you, I'm gonna seed you. And if I don't seed you, you're going back into long-term storage. And so think about your short-term storage as well as your long-term storage. And I'm sure there'll be some questions about long-term storage and later on. So, and then I want to back up, and I just want to say this next one is the one that I think needs to be like a workshop unto itself, which is this concept of being aware and being self-aware. And this is that idea of what, what has happened since I put those seeds in, that closet, or what has happened since I seeded those lettuces out? Has it been 90 degrees? Was there a giant thunderstorm and I noticed, soil splashed around the benches because there was, a lot of raindrop effect on my flats, and surely, seeds kind of maybe moved around and floated around. Did it get really cold? Was there a cold snap? Was there a hot snap? Was I up transplanting, vegetables, and I realized, oh geez, I forgot to open my greenhouse door, and it's really sunny for the first time in late April or May, and things got a little warm in there. Most things looked okay, but then 10 days later, I can pretty much set my watch to about 10 days after a particular region or state has its first above 80 stretch of weather in spring. And I can pretty much set my watch about 10 days after that, maybe 14, I'll start getting calls about poor lettuce germ, because lettuce in particular has this, this characteristic of turning off when the temperatures get above about 77, 78 degrees. It's called thermodormancy. And so, yeah, that happens. And so I can usually set my watch. So being aware of those moments and keeping really copious notes, on things, not just seeds and seeding. Those are really good notes to have, but also just about like weather and personnel. Like if you're a commercial grower and you sent someone down to the greenhouse that maybe wasn't the greatest about like keeping track of how long they were, flooding flats with the hose end sprinkler, equipment malfunctions. Did the heater turn off? Did the roll-up sides break and we haven't fixed them on our greenhouse for a few weeks, or so on and so forth. You get the message, and then act and react. So we'll get to that in a second. But I kind of went over this a little bit, but these are kind of like moving forward. So two big highlights: check in with me or your rep at other seed companies about specific seed lots and about specific issues you're having, and then make seed storage something that doesn't need constant tinkering or maintenance. Dial that in. Really, do your research, or decide your method, and then really dial that in. Make sure there's enough space. Make sure that you have the right containers. Make sure that your short-term storage piece is really well taken care of. And then the act and react. Act fast, not slow. And here's an example of lettuce reseed. Clearly, the 6-pack on the lower right had 3 varieties do really well, and then 3 varieties not do well. And the 3 varieties that did not do well were likely not the 3 varieties that are labeled there, Lovelock, Encino, and Nevada. They were likely 3 other varieties that simply didn't germinate. And so I reseeded those 3 cells. Now, I don't always recommend reseeding into the existing flat. I did in this case because I think I just maybe I kind of knew that the lettuce that I was seeding in those 3 cells, just wasn't. I kind of had a hunch that it wasn't great lettuce, and so when it didn't pop up as quick as the others, I just immediately reseeded. And you'll be surprised at how quickly those lettuce will catch up, and they'll certainly catch up during the transplanting phase, or at transplanting. If you transplant, a few lettuces that are 25 days old, and a few lettuces that are 18 to 21 days old, they can be a little harder to get out of the flat and get in the ground. But you probably won't be surprised. But it always seems surprising how little you can tell, 3 weeks later, which ones were the younger transplants at the time. So they can transplant very young. But I do recommend in some cases, just reseeding more real estate, like a new flat, like a new 6-pack, to make up for that ground. There are some issues with competition that happen here. And there also are some issues with pests and nuisance issues with that cell being open in the greenhouse without plants growing in it. The fungus gnats seem to like that environment quite a bit. And you can get a little mold, a little scumminess on top of certain potting soils that can be problematic and can spread. And you can see a little bit of that up above in the fennel seeds. So just be aware of that. But act fast. Always be seeding. Here's a quick slide that just shows a couple ththings. And there's no, I'm not burying the lead here. I really am just showing. I'll get to what I'm trying to say in a bit, but I'm not trying to espouse a particular strategy here. But I do want to say that for years and years and years, I was really resistant to using lights for germination, but I broke down and I bought some lights on Craigslist for my basement, and I've quite enjoyed it. But the flat on the left is not a difference between. They were both grown under lights actually, but they're just a difference between cell size. And so the one in the back is a 128 common cell size, and the one in the front is a 98, 128 and 98. And you can really see, like, they're different lettuce varieties. I understand that. There might be some comparative ones between the two flats, but just simply like much bigger, more robust transplants out of the 98. So does that say you should do 98s? Not necessarily. Real estate in the greenhouse during certain times of the year, quite valuable. And so the 128s might be more important, that cell size, get more plants on your bench space. But it does say that maybe during the summertime, when things are growing much faster, that it might be worth, especially if you have some greenhouse space, growing your cell size choice. The picture on the right is even more stark. And then the next slide shows it again with a different plant. But these are lettuces that were grown in the greenhouse mid-May. I think the label said like 512, something like that. You might be able to see it, but I can't. And the flat in the back are the same varieties grown under lights. And the different cell sizes, but still same week. And this isn't to set, and I've got a pretty nice little greenhouse. It's got a little heater in it. It's not the best commercial greenhouse I've ever grown in, but it certainly grows some beautiful transplants. And so this isn't to say you should grow under lights instead of greenhouses, but it is to say that the greenhouse, while it is an excellent environment for seeding plants in May, clearly is not as consistent and didn't give the same conditions as under lights in my basement. When those lights are on in my basement, it's over 70 degrees, between 70 and 74 degrees. I got the lights at like 16 hours. I don't think there's 16 hours of light in mid-May in my greenhouse. The nighttime temperatures are pretty consistent, even when the lights are off, because I've got a little, my furnace is down there and it's not blowing warm air in there, but it stays pretty warm then. So you can just see the difference. And if I go to the next slide, you'll even see it even more starkly, I think, well, it's about the same, but here's basil, and there you can see the label. And the picture on the left is the same as the picture on the right. It's just blown up, cropped out so that you can see it much closer. But the flats in front on the left are in the greenhouse, and the flats in the back are under lights. And so then there's a close-up of the Rutgers Obsession basil, and you can really see a difference in the performance under lights as in the greenhouse. Again, not saying you should grow under lights, because those ones that grew in the greenhouse did really well. And had I not grown any under lights, I wouldn't have known what I was missing. But, it's just worth noting that the environment in a greenhouse, while it's excellent, it can really be, can fluctuate quite a bit. And then you'll also notice in this picture, just worth noting, that the sacred basil there that was like 2-year-old seed, and I got kind of what I paid for. I didn't get very good germ there. You can see it, in the bigger picture as well. Okay, so I've got about 20 minutes or so left.
Yeah, just about.
And so at this point, we can decide, if there are questions either in the chat or questions in the group, we can just have a conversation about the topic that I just, introduced, and or conversations about seeds in general, and or conversations about problems that you have germinating seeds and why that might be the case. Or we can focus on these three crops. What does it look like?
There's one question in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know if people want to unmute, but I'll ask this one for now. Have you found?
I'm going to stop sharing for a second so
okay,
I can
perfect.
see anybody's face that might be.
There we go. Have you found a difference between fluorescent grow lights and LED grow lights?
Mine are not LEDs, but they're those T5s, I think, that are grow lights. I bought them as grow lights and they came with the bulbs. So they're not LEDs, but they are like more full spectrum than a regular shop light. Fluorescent shop light. And I think there is a difference. As far as LEDs are concerned, I think there's even another level of performance difference. But these were on Craigslist, and I knew they were really good lights because I did the research on them, and I got them for a Craigslist price. And I still spent some money on them, but I knew that I wasn't gonna, like, if I hadn't found those, I might have gone after some LEDs. A lot of the professional growers that I'm working with who are growing microgreens as a business and who use LEDs either inside a grow room or inside their greenhouses are using LEDs, and they're using the ones that like glow purple at night. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but like, they always share on their Instagram pages that like their greenhouse is glowing purple.
Great. Sue says that she noticed a decline in germination of easy leaf throughout the season. She started seedlings in a temperature light controlled environment and stored the seeds in the plastic containers that they arrived in, and she stores them in the freezer.
Yeah. So the easy leaf lettuces are a one-cut lettuce, and they're very similar to the lettuces that are out there in the conventionally produced seed world called Salanovas. So just a little vocabulary there as to what these lettuces are, and they're designed to be grown either in really tight spacing or grown as a head, and they're bred such that when you cut them above the basal stem, they all have the same size, and so that's what makes them commercially valuable product. And they have cool textures, and so they're really excellent in salad mixes for that reason. And they always come pelleted, and so that's another sort of hurdle, or I don't know if it's a hurdle as much as it is like a pitfall, quicksand, because pelleted lettuce seed has its own set of circumstances. So I already mentioned the thermodormancy piece, so when someone originally says that I saw a decline in my lettuce germination percentage as the season progresses. That's where my mind's going. But then I heard that maybe all these seeds were started under the same kind of temperature controlled environment under lights. I hear lights and I think that's good. I think about with lettuce seed, I think about whether it was covered or uncovered. I was taught to germinate lettuce seed uncovered or lightly covered so that it has exposure to light. But I did even notice under my lights in my basement, which is the coolest part of the house, I did see a decrease in germination, especially under certain circumstances, and especially under with pelleted varieties as the season progresses. Pelleted seed is more often than not primed, and that is an industry strategy where they actually expose the seed to a little bit of moisture and a little bit of heat through friction as they're pelleting the seed, and then they pause that process. They actually start the germination process, and they're doing that because we know we don't do it. The company that is pelleting the seed and or breeding the seed is doing this, but they know that lettuce seed can be really, really different, even in a lot, as far as its germination time. A day or two, with up to 24 hours before you see all the seeds germinating in the flat. And in California or Florida, or even some places here more locally, when they're seeding acres and acres of lettuce, they need that lettuce to germinate at the same time. If their difference is 12 to 24 hours, and they're sending harvest crews out there, they can, you can think about it like, let's say it's even 20% germinates 24 hours later, they will not get that harvest. Those won't meet the specs for the wholesale distribution that they're looking for. So they want that lettuce to germ virtually at the same time. And so this priming method is what sort of facilitates that. And so that can shorten the shelf life of the seed, because that process of germination has started. And so, if you think about it, like, then everything thereafter, as far as the handling of that seed, can in fact really be amplified as far as the viability of that seed. Furthermore, pelleted lettuce seed is just harder to germinate than raw lettuce seed. Raw lettuce seed has its own challenges. The primary challenge being that it's light and it can float. And so if it's ever let to dry out and then water comes in a way that's anything more than a mist until that little embryonic root gets down and anchored into the soil, that hypocotyl, the lettuce seed can kind of float in that little cell, in that little depression. So, and then the percentage over 100 seeds or 1,000 seeds will go down considerably, down to it. What I hear from growers is that they call me when it's like 30 to 50%. That's when I hear about germination problems. It seems like that's the magical number that people call me with, is 30%. It's like that's the percentage that I'm getting reported, and a lot of that has to do with like either user error, but it also, in the case of pelleted seed, it has to do with the fact that just getting that pellet to either dissolve, some of them dissolve and some of them crack open like a dinosaur egg, in order to get that to do that and that seed to like get out of that pellet and into the soil, it takes even more moisture than normal, and it can never dry out, because if it does dry out, then the clay pelleting can actually wick that moisture away from the little baby seedling and it back into the clay. So, so that said, if that were to happen again, don't hesitate to call me, because you might not be the only one that's having a problem with that particular pelleted seed. And I've got an issue log, and not only am I updating, but that everybody's updating. And lettuce seed that's been pelleted can in fact crash. It can. And so it's not ever weird for you to call that in, and we can have a conversation about it. And I can usually send you a follow-up. I can either send you a follow-up from the same lot, or I can send you a follow-up from a new lot. And weirdly enough, and then I'll stop. This is all, more than you ever wanted to know about lettuce, I'm sure. But weirdly enough, green leaf lettuce that's been pelleted is more apt to crash than anything else. Don't ask me why, but it's true. And it has to do with the priming piece, and I think the way it continues to respirate. But it can go from it'll go like 90, 90, 92, 91, 93, 90, 85, 20. And just crash. It doesn't slowly go down. It can go off the cliff as far as its germination percentage.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful. It looks like Ellen has her hand raised. Ellen, you can unmute.
Hi, Paul. So I just have to say a caveat beforehand. Our group is gardeners, not farmers, and we're doing 4x4 raised beds. We've very kindly received some donated seeds from you guys, and we've also bought seeds in really small bulk, nothing that a farmer would buy. So different gardeners in our group are breaking down either the small packets or the bulk into small seed envelopes to pass out to people. And I'm just wondering if you have any tips and things to caution about that way. It's kind of hard for me to have a quote unquote quality control around that, even in my own house, but certainly with other people. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, as people are helping to distribute these seeds and pack these seeds, and once the gardeners get them and maybe they don't use them for a few weeks or whatever.
Well, yeah, it's a great question. And I do the same thing, So I've mentioned Salanova earlier, and if anybody's ever bought Salanova, they know, and this is not a knock on Johnny's, because I'm a big fan and big customer of Johnny's. I always have been. But their Salanova is really expensive, and it gets more expensive per the seed as it gets lower. And that's the case with all seed companies. So I buy large amounts of Salanova than I could ever use, and then I divvy it up between 3 or 4 friends. And so I think that everything I talked about really stands wherever the seed goes. So there should be some quote unquote long-term storage at the place that's dark, cool, and dry. And in a plastic container is often best for that. You noticed some cardboard boxes in my, and to be honest with you, some of those are seeds that's old. And so I've moved them into the cardboard boxes, because at this point I'm just gonna spread them out. Corn that is 4, 5, 6 years old at this point, and I'm just gonna, seed it out and see what happens. But the seed that I've got, that I'm really excited about, that's all gone into those plastic bins. And then maybe even inside that, some plastic bins inside that with desiccant in them. So the degree to which that long-term storage, no matter where it goes, that those protocols are followed. And then short-term storage, which is, instead of I'm going to seed you, I'm going to break you down into these individual gardener packets, that's done in a way that is also somewhat controlled and that doesn't last forever. So just because you have really good long-term storage, you don't want to then take it out to the coffee table and let it sit out there for 3 or 4 days, and drinks are coming out and sitting on coasters, but they're sweating onto the table, and things are getting a little moist here and there, and the packets are getting a little moist. You don't want that. So it's really just about protocols kind of following that seed all the way through. And it's cool, dry, and dark. And then proper labeling. Don't forget that part. That's probably more important. I mean, all the seed quality in the world isn't going to be great if people don't know what it is. You know, like they lose track of it. They wanted yellow and they got red or whatever.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Linda has a question about carrots. She says, New Hampshire's, it's hard to grow carrots in New Hampshire because of the rocks, so many rocks, and is wondering if pelleted carrots do as well.
Well, pelleted carrots can be harder to germinate, just like the lettuce ones, for the same reasons that they do take, more moisture to germinate. But the benefit is that, either in a production scale, they're uniform. And so when people are using seeders that rely on uniformity of shape, the pelleted seeds can be quite nice because, either it's a vacuum seeder or a brush seeder. That's nice. By hand, I can tell you my son he's 13. He's been seeding carrots with me since he was a tyke, and he would prefer to do, he just would never do raw carrot seeds because I don't know that I'd ask him to, no offense to him, but they'd just be, he'd get rid of a whole packet in the first 5-10 feet. So I do the raw ones, and I'm very carefully with the packet or whatever little seeder I might happen to have by hand, but he's using pelleted ones. So they're much easier to do. They're not really going to benefit you at all, with your soil type and especially stones, but variety will be really the trick there. There's a variety of carrot. We don't sell it. We've been flirting with this carrot for quite a while. It's an open pollinated carrot. There's new Carota. And so, can you hear me? Because my internet connection is unstable.
You cut out for a moment. You said
Great.
that you, yeah.
So this Carota is Shin Carota is a sort of a little bit of a shorter, stubbier carrot, and it's kind of a rugged little carrot, tough little guy and gal. And so it might be one to look at and really maybe consider those carrots instead of the more longer tapered carrots. Maybe go with some of these shorter, broader shoulder carrots that you might find in the OP lines. And then maybe look up this Carota carrot, Kuroda, I think it is. And Shin Carota is the one I'm after.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Germinating carrots altogether, it can be one of the most frustrating things in the garden. And so do yourself a favor and, YouTube the heck out of that and try everything that you see. I know that the gal from Fruition Seeds, her name is Petra. She's just fun to watch her videos no matter what, but she does a cool thing with remay on the ground and she wets that remay. And so there's a lot of tricks of the trade out there with carrots. You got to find the one that works for you or the more than one that works for you and then roll with that one, especially during the heat of the summer. It can be really challenging.
Thank you. Looks like we're just about out of time. Do you want to add anything else before we close up?
Well, not necessarily, other than let me just share my information here. Is my slide back up?
Yes.
Oh, right there. Yeah.
Perfect. And we do have Paul's contact information in the program guide as well. So you can find it there. Great. So this concludes our workshop. Thank you, Paul, for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. And thanks everyone for being here today. We hope you'll join us for the next session this evening at 7 o'clock. That is Saving Seeds for Self-Sustainability and Community with Hari Adhikari and Sylvain Ducasa. And we'll pop the workshop links in the chat here in a moment. In the meantime, check out our virtual exhibitor fair with 17 different exhibitors, including our conference bookstore hosted by Main Street Bookends. And when you order any books through Main Street Bookends, include NOFA-NH in the comments, and 20% of proceeds will be donated back to NOFA New Hampshire. Also, please mark your calendars for our upcoming programs: NOFA New Hampshire's Farm Bill listening session on February 17th, and our Feeding the Family Organic Gardening series, which is 6 sessions bi-weekly from February 22nd to May 3rd. And finally, check out our bulk order program to save on farming and gardening supplies. The order deadline is February 28th with pickup on March 19th and 20th in Andover, New Hampshire, Ware, and Rochester. And that's all. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Paul.